Okay, so under Newton's laws of motion, we decided to look at the friction aspect before we moved on to the other part. And we looked at, from the previous lesson we had on this, we already established what static friction is and what kinetic friction is. And that idea, everybody has that idea, okay? But the issue I've realized is with the trying to explain it, some few details are left out. Now, don't forget that we've already spoken about friction in itself already. In the past lessons, we have already touched on friction. And we already know that when we talk about friction, we are looking at an opposing force. An opposing force. So we went ahead this time and looked at the fact that we have two kinds of friction, the static friction and the kinetic friction. So we mentioned that the static friction, as per further explained here, let's say a subset of kinetic friction. We are saying that static friction acts when the surfaces are stationary. So we are here looking at the moment, the time, or the period within which we have static friction in action. So we think of a box on the floor, and we look at static friction is what keeps the box from moving, okay, without being pushed, and it must be overcome with a sufficient opposing force before the box will move. Okay, so we are looking at the fact that the box is stationary, okay, and it's not moving. And that is where we say static. Now, there's an information left out here because we assumed that you know what friction is already. So before you define anything regarding friction, there are certain other things that you need to add in your definition. So if you look here at what I call a simple definition or simple way of explaining this, we are saying that when a force acts on a body in contact with another body, and that's where a lot of you left out that information, because you cannot talk about friction where there's no contact. So you cannot just say that, say, the friction that keeps a box from moving without being pushed, okay? And then not making it known in any idea that captures the fact that there should be contact. So when a force acts on a body in contact with another body, such that the bodies are stationary, the force resisting motion between the two surfaces in contact is referred to as the static friction. So make sure you mention that fact that the two bodies are in contact, the surfaces are in contact, and that there's no motion between the two surfaces where there's a force in action. Now, going back to what the static friction mentioned, that with it says static friction is what keeps the box from moving without being pushed. Now, here, some of you get the idea that the box is just resting and there's no force acting on it. If there's no force acting on it, why would we say without moving? Because if you say something is not moving, then of course it is resisting motion or resisting a force. So there might not be a physical force probably being used to push, but there's a force acting on it for it to slide. So we could say that without sliding, in that case, its own weight is trying to get it to slide where there's a slope. So its weight is trying to get it to slide. So there's that horizontal force trying to get it to slide along the surface. But where we have the surface being horizontal and not a slope, then the body is resting. In that case, there's no horizontal force. So here we cannot talk about friction, whether static or whatever. We cannot talk about friction. So when we are talking about friction, there must be a force in action for the body to resist that force. That is when we mention friction, because friction itself is the force that resists motion. So there cannot be resistance when there's no force. So in this case, we will simply say when the force acts on a body in contact with another body, and say that the two surfaces or the two bodies are stationary. Then we can talk about the force that is resisting that motion as the static friction. Then we went ahead to look at the kinetic friction. And we are saying that kinetic friction, also referred to as the dynamic friction, is a force that resists the relative motion of the surfaces once they are in motion. Once they are in motion. So here again, it's a still friction. That means that one, there must be contacts between the two surfaces, and that there must be motion also. There must be a force moving the body. This time, not the force where the body is not moving, but there must be a force such that the body is moving. The surfaces are in motion. So these two key ideas must be mentioned. So, of course, the body is in motion, just that. So we have, in a simple term, just like the other one, we can say that when a force acts on a body in contact with another body, again, such that the bodies are in motion, the force resisting motion between the two surfaces in contact is referred to as the kinetic friction. So there must be a force, of course, in action, and then the bodies here must be in motion. Then we can say that the force resisting motion between the two surfaces, and that is what we refer to as the kinetic friction. So in defining it, we put all the ideas together, and then it becomes a whole. So from here, we went ahead, of course, we're looking at why static friction is higher than kinetic friction. And then we went ahead to state the fact that the two surfaces, the two surfaces have different forces acting at a moment or a particular time. So we went ahead to look at why. And this is what brought us to what we meant by real contact and apparent contact. And this side again, some of you were giving me some ideas. The idea was there, all right, but how it was being put and explained was kind of off. So we talked about apparent and real. First, let's get the meaning of the word apparent, okay, understand it properly. So let me bring it down to our normal day-to-day activity. Now, if I ask right now, Sadiq, I ask you, where is Rabiat?
She's in a country.
Okay, right now in her house, where is she? Is she in the hall or in a bedroom?
I guess she's on her bed. Lazy woman.
Okay, so Rabiat is not lazy. How do you know she's lazy? Be
She's
careful.
sleeping on her bed and she's doing a class. I know her.
Okay, so
Thank
so
you, Mr. Boafo.
so um I like the aspect where you said I guess. I guess so apparently she's in the room on her bed. I guess apparent. Whenever something is apparent, it's more like a guesswork. Something you are not sure of. It is apparent. So apparently she's in her room on her bed. You are not sure of it. So that brings out the difference between apparent and real. Real is where we are sure, we are certain for a fact. Now, when does contact become apparent? Apparent contact is the kind of contact that we see with the eye, the unaided eye. Until microscopes came in, we couldn't see what was happening at the microscopic level, at the atomic level. We couldn't see. And that is a shortcoming of the human eye. We cannot see things at the microscopic level. And the microscopic level or the atomic level is the real level, is the real happening. That's the point at which we see the realities of life. Otherwise, we won't be able to see how atoms are arranged in particles, in bodies, in matter. We won't be able to see. We'll just be talking about matter as we see it. We pick a wood, we say wood, this is how it is, it's just wood. We break it and we see the pieces, and that's all that we can perceive with the eye. We can see with the eye. So the things that we see with the eye, we describe them as apparent. Because when we go to the microscopic level and use machines, that is where we will see the real thing. So when we have two bodies in contact, as we see here, what we see here is a smooth contact. Everything is smooth. The surfaces are smoothly in contact. We don't see any gaps, any space. And that is what we call apparent contact. So apparent contact is what we perceive with the eye, the unaided eye. The things we see, the kind of contact, and in this case, specifically in this case, the contact that we see with the unaided eye. And that's what we are describing as the apparent contact. Then we come to the real contact. The real contact is what we now see with the aid of a microscope. Okay, what we now see with the aid of a microscope. And that is what we are describing as the real contact. So do we get the difference between the apparent contact and the real contact now, clearly? How to define it and present it? Do we all understand?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is the difference between it. Yes. Yes.
Please, you see in the exercise, right? You asked for two things that occur, that like some things that happen for
Yes,
the
I'll come to that. I'll come to
okay.
that part. And that part, if you go there again, you realize that I've changed the way I presented the question. Because I realized that I think some of you got confused with the way probably I presented the question over there. So I've looked at that also and then changed how I've presented the question there. So you can, when you read it now, probably you look at it in a different way. Okay, so we have here the real contact and the apparent contact and how to present it. That apparent contact is the kind of contact we see with the eye unaided, and the real contact is what we see at the microscopic level or with the help of a microscope. It's as simple as you don't have to write any essay and things, stuff like that. Okay, so we're looking at what accounted for this. Why is it that there's a difference between the kinetic friction and then the static friction? So we realize that there's something we call pressure. Of course, in both cases, there's pressure. Okay, whether we are talking about kinetic friction or static friction, we are saying that there's pressure. But we realize that in the pressure is force over area. So with a particular force in this case, and the force here is the weight of the body resting on the body below, on the surface below. So that will be our force in this case. Now, this force over the area. So we are looking at now area is the area that changes in the two cases. Where there's apparent contact in the real contact, we are looking at what is happening in reality. So in reality, we have realized that the area of contact is actually smaller than we saw, actually smaller than what we perceived in the apparent contact. In the apparent contact, we thought that the entire surface of the body above was in contact with the same surface, the same size of surface below. So if the area of the body resting up there is say 10 centimeters squared, we're expecting the same 10 centimeters squared down. So they were in contact. But we realize that there's in real contact, the fact that in reality it is not so. The surfaces have asperities and valleys. Therefore, not all the parts are actually in contact. Only few parts are in contact, which means that the area is small. And the smaller the area, the higher the pressure. So meaning that there's very high pressure actually in reality. The pressure is higher than what we would have expected, because in the apparent contact, the area would have been bigger, meaning that the pressure would have been smaller. So in reality, the area is small and the pressure is higher. And that is the first thing we saw. And then we also said that this means that if there's high pressure, then it's going to create a strong adhesion, a strong bonding, which we refer to as cold welding. Okay, there's a strong bonding between the surfaces. And then also with the asperities and valleys, there's also interlocking between them. Okay, which further gets the body or the two surfaces to be very stable in contact, such that when a force acts on them, it will be difficult for it to move, therefore resulting in the static friction. So all these forces, we said, come together to create a very strong static friction. Then, so this is the part where we see the items that actually get the body to be in static friction, the two surfaces, so that when a force is applied, the body does not move. Okay. And this is also what makes the difference between static friction and kinetic friction, because this is creating the static friction, which is making the static friction higher than the kinetic friction. So these are the things, the factors that make the static friction higher than the kinetic friction. So we went ahead to now state what will happen, what happens when the body is in motion, when there's enough force that is able to break this static friction, break through it, and cause the body to move. That means that when the force is big enough to go above the static friction, and therefore the body must move. So we say that what happens at this moment is that the interlocking between asperities and then the valleys breaks. Okay, they get broken. The interlockings get broken before the surfaces can move over each other. Okay, so we said that what? So in other words, there's abrasion, and this is just one thing. Breaking of interlocking bonds is the same as the abrasion. So abrasion must occur. So if you state that there's interlocking, there's breaking of interlocking, and then you also state that abrasion is another point, no, these two are the same. In other words, when there's breaking of interlocking between the two surfaces, it is the same as saying that there's abrasion between the surfaces. Okay. Then we also said that this means that there's further smoothing, okay, between the two surfaces, reducing friction during motion. So there will be smoothing, of course. Once there's breaking of interlocking between the two surfaces, there's going to be smoothing because the surfaces are not that rough as they used to be. The surfaces have been, the locking, the asperities have been broken. So once asperities are broken, there's going to be further smoothing. The surfaces are not sharp and rough like they were. There's smoothing. And anytime there's smoothing, there's a reduction in friction. So that static friction has now reduced in value. It will reduce in its magnitude because there's further smoothing between the surfaces. So now this is the point 2. Further smoothing. There's smoothing between the two surfaces. Okay. And one more thing we need to mention here is the fact that pressure will also reduce, because once there's smoothing, the area of contact will increase. The area of contact will increase. That's the actual area, the real area of contact will increase. And once there's more area, bigger area, it means that friction will, pressure will reduce. And pressure will reduce, meaning that the bonding, the cold welding will also reduce, the force of bonding. The bonding between the two surfaces will reduce. So this in turn brings us to what we call kinetic friction. So the friction has now adopted a new value, a reduced value, which is what we call the kinetic friction. So kinetic friction now, the friction experience when the two surfaces are in motion. The two surfaces are in motion after the force is applied. And it has a lower value than the static friction. And the reason is that interlocking bonds have been, interlocking between asperities have been broken, or there has been abrasion between the two surfaces. There has been further smoothing between the two surfaces, and then area has increased. Area of contact has increased. Therefore, pressure has reduced, meaning that the bonding between the two surfaces has reduced. There has been weaker bonding. The bonding has become weaker. So the surfaces are now in motion, and therefore kinetic friction. Any question at this point?
Can you name the two points again?
Come again?
Can you name the 2 points again?
There are actually 3 points.
Oh,
One is not written. The first one, I said that the interlocking of asperities has been broken. We are looking at why static friction now reduces to kinetic friction, which has a lower value. Why it now has a lower value? Lower value because the interlocking between asperities is broken. Or we can say that there has been an abrasion between the two surfaces in contact. Then secondly, there has been further smoothing between the surfaces. And then thirdly, the area of contact has increased. Of course, since there has been breaking of interlocking bonds, area will definitely increase. That means that there's going to be more contact. More surfaces will now be touching each other, or more parts of the surfaces will now be touching each other. So area of contact has increased, which means that pressure has reduced. So these are the 3 factors that lead to the reduction of the static friction and now becoming the kinetic friction. Any question? No question. That's fine. So again, what is friction? When we talk about friction, what is friction? Hakim, what is friction?
Am I supposed to use what you've taught us right now? Because all I know is that friction is the force that opposes any form of motion between surfaces, 2 or more surfaces in contact.
Well said. So that is friction. Simply, that is friction. So now,
Mr. Bafo,
yes,
so can you say for the static one that friction is the force that's opposing the movement, even though the object is not moving? Do you get it?
yes.
Mr. Bafo?
Now,
Mr. Bafo?
we are, yes.
Did you hear me?
Yes, I heard you.
So am
When
I
we are
wrong?
when we are defining friction in general
Yeah.
terms, we say that it resists or a resistance to motion between two surfaces in contact. But the moment we go to further classification of friction and we say static friction, then you have to mention the fact that the two surfaces in contact are not moving, are stationary. And that's the essence of the word static. Do you understand that?
Yes, yes.
Uh-huh. So the further resist motion between two surfaces say that they are static, they are stationary. Okay. So now we are saying that, so of course, we have two bodies in contact. For example, mass A, mass B, they're in contact. Okay. Now, what is the friction here? Mass A, mass B, what's the friction? Russell, what is the friction here? If I have two bodies, A and B, the A, B resting on B, as you see it here, what is the friction?
Real? No, sorry, apparent.
No, that apparently you are describing the contact. I mean the friction. What do you think the friction value will be?
Oh, static.
That the type of friction here is static. And what do you think its value will be?
I don't know.
I mean, any value, yes, just any, but give it any value you wish.
Oh, like 25.
25, okay. Um, David, are you here? Can you give it a value? David is not here. Yes, David. Can you give it
He
a
said
value?
no idea.
No idea. Oh, I didn't hear him.
He
Okay.
says he has no idea. Yeah, he typed it.
Oh, okay. I'm presenting PowerPoint, so I can't see any charts here. Yamiche,
Reese says 10.
Angel
Angel
says
says
0.
0. Richmond says 0. These people cannot speak, so they are typing it.
but I can't see because I'm presenting PowerPoint.
I can speak.
Rabiat says 0. It's 0.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Nine.
Okay, Angel says
I
0.
think it's 0.
Okay. Any other?
I
Mr.
changed mine
Waffle,
to
did you hear
1.5.
mine?
What did you say?
0.00.
100.
Yours is 100. Okay. Okay.
1.4.
Okay.
0.00.
All
Reese
right.
says 100.
Okay. That's fine. So, as we see the body resting on it, the friction is 0. Congratulations to all those who gave 0.
Mr. Waffle, why 0?
Yes, Angel,
Because
we did it.
a question.
Yes.
Are you coming to
Reese, you're not
explain why
serious.
it's 0?
Come again.
Sadiq,
Are you coming to explain why it's
Did
0?
I talk to you?
Yes.
Okay. Then when you
Wow.
finish, if
Yeah.
I have a
Rabia,
question,
shut up.
then.
Hey,
Okay.
Mr. Balfour, you misled me. Oh. Ah, you said just give any number.
Yes. I said give any number, any value.
Hey, that's why you killed me. Oh.
I said
Sadiq, it's not funny. It's not funny.
Explain.
it's the same question the other people answered. It's the same question they also answered, and they gave 0.
Are you explaining why? Because I have a question.
Yes, I'm explaining why.
Okay.
So I said, we mentioned already that friction cannot be friction where there's no force. On this diagram, you don't see the force. You don't see any force acting on it.
But the apparent forces.
No, there's nothing like
Like weight.
apparent force. I never mentioned anything like apparent force.
Like
Mr.
I'm creating a new one.
It's all
No.
about assumptions. Won't you assume some force somewhere?
The only
Yes,
time
that's
you
what
assume, hold on. Here, okay, tell me, if I gave you this diagram, right? And I told you that A is a surface, a table, okay, and B is a mass. And I told you to draw the force diagram for this. What force would you show here? What forces would you show?
Wait.
Very good. Wait. And then what?
Normal.
Reaction.
Normal reaction. Is there any other force you give me?
Nah.
No.
Good. And where is the weight acting?
Downwards. Vertically downwards.
Normal reaction. Where is it acting?
Upwards.
Upwards. So which force is actually sliding this body along the surface? Is there any force?
No force.
So no friction.
Okay, so Mr. Buffo, please, I have a question. In case you were something like, what is the value of static friction in the diagram? Will you still give 0?
Yes, it is 0. Whether it is, the fact is it's not even moving, so we can't talk about kinetic friction. So we can only look at static friction. And it is 0 because there's no force that is supposed to move this body. There's no force that is attempting to push the body to move.
Okay. I think I get it.
So friction is 0. Okay. So we are saying that friction is no friction where there's no applied force. There's no force in action. Friction is no friction. So how can there be a force resisting when there's no other force in action? For example, as you sit on your chair or as you stand, you can't say you are resisting somebody when there's nobody pushing you. You can't even say you are resisting when you are not falling. You are standing up straight, you are not falling, and you say, I'm resisting. What are you resisting?
Gravity.
Gravity is acting downward. So your resistance to gravity is your normal reaction. All right?
Resisting temptation when there's no temptation.
Okay. Even the normal reaction is not your resistance. It's the resistance of the floor to your weight. When we talk about normal reaction, it is not even your resistance. It's the resistance of the floor to your weight. So you have no resistance. You are not resisting anything. Okay, so let's look at this. When we look at things in the real sense, okay, when we look at things in the real sense, the real contact, friction, then we look at this figure. In this figure or this diagram, for the contact between the two surfaces, we see the real contact. What is really happening there? Okay, then we can talk about force being applied. And the moment this force is applied, this body is trying to move. Okay, it's trying to move, but the asperities are blocking it. In reality, it's trying to move. Asperities are blocking it from moving. Then we can talk about friction. So where there's no force, there's no friction. Where there's a force applied, we can talk about the asperities, locking, and all the conditions that create the static friction. Therefore, we can talk about friction, and that friction here is the static friction at this point because there's resistance to the motion. It's not moving, they are locked. So the surfaces cannot slide over each other. Then it is at this point that we can say there is friction or there is static friction. Any question? This is the end. Any
so
question?
You said when there is no net force, there's no friction. Can we
Of
put
course,
it that way?
when there's no net force, there's no friction.
Mr. Buffo.
Yes.
Mr. Buffo. Please, can we
Hello.
solve like questions? Like, hello.
I'm listening
Hello?
to you. I'm here.
I'm saying that can we solve questions like the one that you brought in the exercise? So we'll solve it and see how it's like.
The one in the exercise. Which exercise?
Yeah. The one that you
They
said
want
that
you to do the
if you go
exercise for
and
them.
check
Don't
in, you
mind them.
didn't do well. The exercise 2 friction.
Yeah, there's the two friction. That one, don't forget, that one was not calculation based. That one you were supposed to answer questions, do a write up. Okay. So let's go to.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Now let's go to a question. Angel. So yeah, Angel showed me a certain question I want us to look at. That's a very beautiful question. I want all of you to look at. So we'll end this slide over here.
Thank you, Angel.
Andy, what did you say? Andy, what did you say? Me, I didn't hear.
Angel has a question for us to look at.
I do not time. 3 minutes. But the way my focus did the inside there.
Our time is up, right?
Yeah. According to our watches, yeah.
Sadiq,
Okay,
what?
okay, then I think I would
Sadiq.
I would put it up. I'll get it and I'll put it up in the Google Classroom. That when we meet on Thursday, we'll solve that.
Then
Is that fine?
Mr. Wafu, then let's wait when we get there on Thursday, then we solve it. So you don't have to put it on the Google Classroom.
No, the reason why I'm putting it there is that I want you to solve and have your answers, certain answers. Okay. Angel.
Send it as a material.
Angel. I hope you have not shared the solution with anybody.
No.
Please let it be like that. Keep it that way.
Hey, Angel, that's how you are. You switch sides.
Hey. Angel, don't share the solution. No. This one is for a good cause. This is for a good cause. Okay. On that day, so that you can independently and genuinely solve it according to how you understand it. But that question, I saw it. I realized that is something that will confuse a lot of you. I realize it. So I need you to solve it the way you understand it, the way you see it. So that when we meet here,
what you guys are talking about. I'm lost.
The question will come. When it comes, you will see it. Okay. So when you see the question, solve the question the way you understand it and the way you see it. From your own individual and independent work. Just solve it and have your. Pardon?
I didn't hear you.
Solve the question the way you understand it.
Which question?
Okay.
Like I'm lost.
No, I'm here to put the question there in the Google Classroom.
But so when you said we'll do it on Thursday, so you wouldn't put it there.
No. We'll do it on Thursday, but solve it before we meet on Thursday and have your own answers ready before we meet.
Oh, okay. Confirm. You make ready. Okay, fine.
So that's how I want us to go about it. So on Thursday we'll solve it. All right. So I guess we'll close here. Yeah. So we have about just 2 minutes. That means our lesson comes to an end. All of you have a nice day.
Sadiq, you are very annoying. You too.